Fallout New Vegas side quests. I didn't know what else to type as my introduction sentence, but I feel like that was probably the most accurate one I could come up with on the fly. In my last video, I mentioned at the end that New Vegas is quality over quantity. I described the game this way because I knew how little time Obsidian had with it, and how much more they could have accomplished if they had had as much time as they wanted or needed. What I didn't realize at the time is that New Vegas has an absurd amount of side quests. Holy shit, this is gonna be a video. So the first one on the list is one I picked up earlier, that lucky old sun. I offered to help out the NCR with their power issues at the Helios 1 solar power plant, and was directed to the quote-unquote idiot with sunglasses. Well, the description wasn't lacking because this guy is a total fucking moron. He was approached by the NCR while they were asking for scientists to come work on the plant and get it operational, to which this guy said he was their man. Apparently the application process was about as rigorous as Walmart, as they took his qualifications at face value and let him on board to just slap buttons and twist dials. Astonishingly, the guy managed to get the plant up and running with a stellar 1% functionality, which, after talking to him, is actually a pretty big accomplishment. Dude took all of his intelligence points and sunk them into luck, apparently. Or charisma. I'm unsure.
Fuck, man. Everything. I push buttons, I turn dials, I read numbers. Sometimes I make up little stories in my head about what the numbers mean.
I offered to help him out and am directed towards a mere control system that needs to be reintegrated to get the whole plant up and running at a capacity that doesn't resemble my college calculus grades. Well, on my brief journey from this room to the next room, I run into another scientist. And by another scientist, I mean the only scientist. He lets me know that there's a weapon of tremendous strength which this facility could be used to power as well, known as Archimedes, which explains the Brotherhood of Steel's interest in this plant. Fortunately, the NCR hasn't quite figured out that the weapon exists, and this guy implores me to redirect and distribute power across the wasteland rather than just to the weapon or solely to the NCR's interests. He also mentions that codename Fantastic in the other room there has been fucking with the plant's comm systems the entire time, which is hilarious. Anyways, when I make it to the computer to redirect power, I'm given the following options. 1. Redirect power to the NCR's main areas. 2. Redirect power everywhere. 3. Get the Archimedes space laser going. 4. Give power to the 2 poorest areas on the map. And 5. Overload the plant, causing it to stop functioning. Well, for this video, I'm more of a free agent, so I don't really care about the NCR. If I give power to the space laser, I have the option of calling down orbital strikes later, which is neato. But I think what I want to do here is just to give power to everyone. Something else to note is the fact that I could activate another part of the Archimedes system, which would kill all of the NCR soldiers here. Which is a good thing to note if I ever find myself doing a Legion run. Anyways, I make it back to Ignacio, who's pleased with my decision and sends me on my way with medical stuff and a science book. I don't have any more noteworthy side quests at this point, so let's switch over to companion quests. I don't usually enjoy having companions in Bethesda games because I feel like they tend to hinder my experience when they start wonking out or blasting at whatever before I can see what's going on. Don't get me wrong, I know it's a personal preference, but I kind of realized it after I ran through Fallout 3 and I was exploring the vaults. It's just one of those things where I want to experience what's happening for myself instead of my partner suddenly taking off and sprinting at some hidden enemy that I don't see. Either way, I've seen a lot of you guys mention that many of the companions in the game have interesting character development and quests attached to them, so I'll give it a go. I'm gonna start with Boone, who was the other sniper who watches over Novak. Well, Boone is a bit, edgy. Although he has a perfect reason to be, seeing as someone in Novak sold off his wife to the Legion as a slave. Yeah, that's kinda heavy shit. Well, Boone trusts you over anyone else here because he's unsure of who to trust in the town. So he tells you to figure out who did it, and then bring them out front so that he can put a bullet in their head. And that's pretty damn cool. What's even cooler is that I can choose to bring anyone out in front of the dinosaur if I so choose. After asking around, it's discovered that Boone's wife was a bit of a stuck-up bitch. God rest her soul. She kinda tended to lock herself away, complain about hospitality, wanted to leave Novak. Most of this info comes from Manny, Boone's sniper replacement for the day shift, which initially caused the most suspicion. Fortunately, I'm a bit of a klepto with unguarded safes and cash registers, and I found a bill of sale which notes Jenny Mae Crawford as the person who brokered the sale of Boone's wife and unborn child to the NCR. Of course, that was more of a direct route. The indirect route involves talking to this crazy old bastard, which reveals that he saw one of the men who took Boone's wife duck into the lobby for a bit. This quest actually does more than provide an interesting revenge story and a new companion in the form of Boone. It actually gives insight into how the Legion deals with other people. They're very meticulous in the documentation of slavery negotiations, and they aren't above using underfed children as a distraction for the NCR, as one such child pulled the pin on a grenade and tossed it at an NCR ranger who lives in Novak. The explosion crippled the ranger and put him out of commission, more or less, as the guy never suspected that a kid would be a threat. So here's the thing about companions in New Vegas. Many of them tend to have follow-up quests, which are unlocked through conversations throughout the history of them following you around. So while I would like to knock out companion after companion here, I actually kind of have to go back and forth between other quests for their next quest to activate. So let's move on to the next set with Boone in tow. What makes the most sense here is to interact with NCR strongholds or the Legion to bolster a history between Boone and myself. So it's off to Camp McCarran. There's not a ton to do here at first glance. And by at first glance, I mean that I don't have any lobotomy markers to follow on my compass, so my brain hurts when my hand isn't held. This caused me to wander and talk to people with names, and has me meeting Bitterroot, a soldier who was raised by the Khans before defecting into the NCR ranks. His childhood was rough, filled with all sorts of fucked up shit like his dad teaching him how to shoot at NCR kids and civilians, and his mom trying to sell him for drugs multiple times. When the massacre at Bitter Springs happened, many of the Khans were killed, and he assisted by killing a few Khans that he had scores to settle with. Eventually, he was taken into the ranks, now serving as a sniper. Man, this game. A lot of these guys have background stories that aren't even related to quests, and it's something that you don't see a lot of the time in other games in the genre. At any rate, I continue to make myself useful around the camp. This involves very average questing material. You know, stuff like treating a girl with psychological issues after she was raped, or beating the shit out of a Legion prisoner to get him to talk. You know, very average, normal stuff. I think Zelda had a few quests like this. I had a lot of fun with this last one, and it wasn't even really a marked quest. You can get this guy to talk through speech checks or intelligence, the latter of which yields some pretty interesting dialogue. I report back to the lady who gave me this mission and she pays me. Then I kill the prisoner. Fuck that guy. During the interrogation, he did mention that there was a spy for the Legion relaying info back to Caesar, so I guess I should look for that dude. Well, turns out it's the high-ranking officer that's leading the investigation who's a spy, which makes sense as to why they haven't been able to catch the dude. After doing a little eavesdropping, I'm able to ascertain the location of a bomb that's been placed on the monorail that's supposed to be heading out, and then I defuse it and turn the dude in. Let me just run part of that by you again. A Legion soldier has worked his way up to captain, and no one noticed. I don't think that says as much about the NCR as it does about the Legion, but we'll get back to this later. During my spy excursion, I also learned of a missing Corporal White. He was visiting a hooker down at the Gomorrah before he disappeared, so it's up to me to figure out what happened to the guy. I gotta say, I didn't really touch on this in the last video, but man, you move slow. It's like, sure it makes things seem bigger, but Jesus, just navigating around Freeside outskirts can be a bit of a chore. At any rate, White went investigating into the water being siphoned into Westside. The people he interacted with before he left either have no idea or just don't believe him. But he went over to Westside and was killed by this bullcut who admitted that he did it to protect the small amount of water that they've been sucking up from the NCR in order to grow crops. The whole thing ends rather anticlimactically as I get the option to either pin the blame on a gang or turn Anderson in. Realistically, I can't blame the guy too much for doing what he did, so I blame the Scorpions and move along. Honestly, I kinda feel like I wasted my time with this quest though, as most of it was slowly moving to Westside and then slowly moving back to report the death of Corporal White. Although I will say that this really does kind of reflect on the NCR's attitude towards people that aren't in the NCR. It's interesting to see their disposition on people who are worse off than they are, and how they would respond to it if I were to try to turn this guy in. But as I was making my long walk back, something popped into my mind. This guy, to be specific. So Nipton is a bit fucked. There are 2 signs that the Legion has been here. The crucifixions and the Legionnaires which opened fire on me immediately. I can't tell which is the bigger sign. So here's what went down here. You got this guy who trekked over from the hub and set up shop as the mayor of Nipton, with 2 prostitutes under his command. In the daytime, the powder gangers drop by and have a good time, and in the nighttime the NCR does the same. Well, one day the super mayor here gets a little greedy and accepts an 8,000 cap bribe to round up both groups and hand them over to the Legion. He has the powder gangers ambush the NCR at night, and the Legion ambushes the ambush. So what do these goofy bastards do with their newfound captives? They just kill them, right? Nah. First, everyone is rounded up and given lottery tickets. The first wave of losers are decapitated. The second wave is crucified. And the final wave is beaten and enslaved, with the second place winner only crippled from the waist down and the first place winner being Oliver Swanick, who was allowed to run free. Yeah, kind of understandable the way he was screaming now, huh? So what happened to the mayor? Well, he was burned on a pile of tires. The ironic justice isn't lost on me, although it's kind of odd to use the term justice when it comes at the hand of Caesar's Legion. Either way, I decide to hunt down the rest of the Legion soldiers and free the captive powder gangers, who run away without a word to me and instant transmission into the night. So I've been around Boone for a while, let's chat him up and see how he feels. Boone is a pretty badass dude. He was part of the 1st Recon Division of snipers for the NCR, which he joined for the extra money when it turned out that he was a pretty good shot. He goes on to tell you how he thinks that the NCR was too sloppy with their acquisition of New Vegas, and how they should have spent more time creating checkpoints and expanding slowly rather than claiming a bunch of land all at once. He also mentions how he thinks about and regrets the massacre of the cons at Bitter Springs every night. But the most heartbreaking thing that Boone mentions is his wife, Carla. He met her when he was on leave, and she talked a lot, which was fine by him because he never knows what to say. The way that he talks about her and holds her up in his mind is truly tragic, and it's expressed very well through only a handful of dialogue. When you pry a little more, Boone reveals that he watched his wife being sold at a slave auction with hundreds of Legion soldiers around. Instead of rushing into that and getting himself killed, he took aim at his target and ended his wife's life instead of letting her go through that inevitable pain that she was about to endure. God, I came to New Vegas to have fun and do stupid shit with robots and big TV men, not to feel like trash. Well, after a bit of time passes following the conversation about Bitter Springs, Boone approaches me and tells me that he's ready to face his past by revisiting the Bitter Springs area, where he slaughtered the cons before. He explains that his outfit of the Rangers was ready to cut off any fleeing cons, expecting armed men to come pouring through the canyon. Instead, their wounded, weak, elderly, and young came fleeing through the passage. When Boone relayed this back to the NCR, their command supposedly didn't understand what they were telling them, and then ordered them to open fire anyways. It's some heavy stuff that's haunted Boone for a while now. He then insists that we stay the night in this canyon, later being awoken to an incoming group of Legion soldiers. Boone thinks that this is his time to die, and is now ready to atone for all that he did while he was a soldier. Well, we kinda mopped the floor with these bastards, and he reconsiders his position in life, vowing to use his skills to do good before he dies. He also gets access to his upgraded armor and his ultimate skill, the building camouflage technique. Like I said before, Boone is a badass dude, and I actually really enjoyed his company. I know I was kind of against the idea of companionship, but I had a lot of fun exploring what makes this guy tick, and having the backup that he provides. I guess there is something to be said about someone having your back in this harsh environment. So as much as it pains me to part ways with Boone, let's move on to the next companion, who was someone I enjoyed talking to in the last video, Arcade Gannon.
Right now, I'm sure you're asking yourself, why hasn't some lucky man scooped this bachelor off his feet? Like I said, I'm boring.
Ever sarcastic and seemingly hiding something bigger, Arcade is a scientist in the followers who's hell-bent on helping the Wasteland's people as much as he can. He has no issue tagging along after seeing what I've done, and proceeds to fill me in that he's in his late 30s, likes reading about nerd shit, and is pretty boring overall. Well, getting to his companion quest is a lot easier than Boone's, as I revisit a few areas that I've already been to and have him babble about whatever's on his mind.
Stop thinking so much. Thanks.
Then he drops the real info that he's been hiding the whole time, that his father was actually a member of the Enclave. I'm sure most of you here know what the Enclave is, but for those of you who don't, they're a group who's comprised of the remnants of the US government, and have largely been involved in a few of the Fallout games as the primary antagonists much of the time. Arcade's dad died when he was young, and he escaped with his mom to the NCR before eventually falling in with the followers. After telling you all of this, Arcade mentions that some Enclave remnants still exist hidden away in the Mojave, and he thinks that we should convince them to fight along the NCR against the Legion. Quite the interesting turn of events, all things considered. The Brotherhood and the Enclave have always been at odds, and like I mentioned before, there are quite a few times where your main goal tends to be to fight alongside the Brotherhood to defeat the Enclave across the franchise. But this is the first time in the series where you can interact with them in a positive manner, albeit at a much lower level. Historically speaking, the Enclave is like a more extreme Brotherhood of Steel, a lesser of two evils in a sense. They tend to not let any outsider join them, stating that you have to be born into the Enclave to be a member. And while I'm not exactly becoming an Enclave soldier here, it'll be interesting to see how these guys react to my request for their help, with all of this information in mind.
All right, I'm in.
Oh, well that was a lot of setup for a, very helpful response. The remnants of the Enclave are actually pretty much all decent dudes who cared more about setting things right rather than continuing to represent the cruel tyranny which a lot of the Enclave leaders seemed to emanate when they were running in full force. Well, except for fucking Orion. That guy hates the NCR and never questioned what the Enclave was doing ever. But for the most part, a lot of these guys seem like they want to do something good with their remaining time, and jump at the opportunity when presented. It's honestly probably the reason that they've made it so far in life after being ruthlessly hunted by the Brotherhood. During this gathering of remnants for Arcade's quest, I stumbled into Jacobstown. Jacobstown is so fascinating to me that I actually have trouble knowing where to start. First of all, there's the setting. If I showed a picture of these mountains and trees to someone who doesn't know too much about New Vegas but has a general grasp on the Fallout games, I imagine them jumping to the conclusion that this area is out of a Fallout game might be slim. I enjoy it a lot, and it gives me a reprieve from the desert area that I didn't expect, much like Oasis in Fallout 3. But moreover, Jacobstown is an area settled and ran by super mutants, specifically by one named Marcus. To some people who may have only ran through the Bethesda-published Fallouts, this name might not ring any bells. But Marcus was actually a pivotal character in Fallout 2, which took place 40 years before New Vegas. He was and is someone who believed in the ideals which the super mutant master presented, but not in any malicious capacity. Those ideals were to give humanity a chance to rise above the petty conflicts and relations which fueled war and conflict, and ultimately establish a long-lasting peace. The town which he established echoes this belief. Named after an old Brotherhood of Steel friend of his who set aside the xenophobic teachings of the Brotherhood in order to form a bond with the super mutant. I could honestly go on, but I'll put the rest of Marcus's travels on the shelf for now and talk about the more relevant info here.
What a story, Mark.
Talking more to Marcus also yields some pretty interesting background information on the Nightkin, specifically that a lot of them are schizophrenic due to the large-scale usage of stealth boys almost constantly. The band of super mutant variants dislike being seen so much that they would rather succumb to this mental state by abusing these stealth boys, which also explains why they hate being stared at. These details are really fucking cool. Anyways, long story short, the remnant stationed here is another Fallout 2 character who wound up here after the events which led to the Enclave's destruction. He's the main person in charge of seeing to it that the Nightkin's mental issues are sorted out when they're using their stealth boys, and only agrees to my plan to help out Arcade if I can further his research, specifically by visiting a group of Night Stalkers and figuring out their seemingly natural stealth fields which they exude. This is kind of an odd break with my quest to help Arcade out, as another follower is directly tied to this quest, Lily Bowen.
Oh no, dearie. 3 makes a crowd.
So I have to part ways with Arcade for a moment to jump into Lily's quest instead. It's a little unfortunate, but it's alright. Lily is an, interesting nut job. She speaks like the Devil's grandma, but she's built like... I guess she's built like the Devil's grandma also. She has a voice in her head who she refers to as Leo, and she takes medicine to help suppress the violent tendencies which Leo constantly whispers into her skull. Unfortunately, the same medicine also tends to cause her to forget a lot of important information, so she has an aversion to taking it at times. The other important thing here to note is that if Lily happens to take a lot of damage while fighting, she goes berserk as Leo takes over, rendering her unresponsive to your inquiries. Well, the remnant who wants me to check out the Night Stalker lair also encourages me to take her along, which has me making it to the back of the cave only to find the body of a Nightkin with a chewed stealth boy attached to him. Apparently, the radiation this thing leaks out caused a rapid mutation within the Night Stalkers, and has given them their seemingly natural tendency for invisibility. With this avenue of research at a dead end, the only other option is to let Lily utilize a prototype of the Stealth Boy Mark II, which helps the Doctor start to figure out a remedy for the mental issues which the Nightkin face. So I again swap out Lily for Arcade and get the last of the remnants on board, and then head out to the Enclave hideout. It's actually really cool to see something so familiar yet unfamiliar as the last of these Enclave soldiers gather for a fight against the Legion or the NCR. I had a lot of fun with Arcade, but I eventually sent him back to the followers in an effort to prepare for the ensuing chaos which the second Battle of Hoover Dam is sure to bring upon Freeside. After I walk out of the hideout, Arcade comes back and presents me with his father's Enclave gear, something he would have worn himself if I had expressed my interest in having him fight at the Hoover Dam.
All I ask is that you put it to good use.
So let's hop back over to Lily for a few and see if she brings anything else to the table before we move on to the next companion. After resolving a small matter which involves some mercenaries under the banner of the NCR who have been harassing Jacobstown, I set out to hit another quest with Lily. Something to note here that I found interesting was the fact that although I initially thought these guys were just regular mercenaries posing as the NCR, they're apparently actually part of the NCR, which is weird because they've been harassing this town for being full of super mutants despite them not doing anything wrong, which I really hadn't seen too much out of the NCR until now. So I decided to hit up the Mojave outpost where a few NCR soldiers are milling around. No one seems to react to Lily's presence, so it may have been one of those things where the NCR is trying to antagonize the mutants into attacking first so that they can righteously take over Jacobstown like Marcus suggests. After picking up a nugget of experience from reporting the Nipton situation to this ranger whose cheeks enjoy eating her glasses, I finally get the option to talk to Lily about her medication. There really isn't too much to the so-called quest here. It's just choosing which dosage of medicine that Lily should take. If she continues to take half doses like she has been, nothing really changes. If she takes her full doses, it causes her combat efficiency to drop, but she no longer suffers mental breakdowns during battle. If she drops her meds completely, it causes her to freak out at half health, but it makes her much more effective in combat. I decided I'd be picking up a new companion anyway, so I might as well help her to not be so angry. Although maybe the forgetfulness which ensues is more of a curse, it's kind of hard to say what the right call is. Either way, let's shuffle over to the next companion, Rex. Well, Rex's quest is pretty straightforward. He's the king's dog, but his brain has been degrading over time. The king tasks you with getting Rex a new brain, and you get 3 fantastic flavors to choose from: an attack damage increase, a damage threshold increase, or a speed increase. Or if you really want, you can give him a big scoop of nothing for a brain also. But I went with the attack damage increase because I feel like it's probably the most helpful. It was the easiest one to get. Man, this old lady Gibson is a shrewd negotiator. This chick's like, yeah, old Ray here is getting pretty up there in age. Probably gonna die soon. So, 700 caps. I mean, I really love her.
Here, Ray. Mama's got something for you.
What the fuck? Anyways, big brain going to big dog make bigger bite. You know how it is. This script is really deteriorating. Anyways, the most interesting detail here is that Rex actually used to be Caesar's dog, as evidenced by the remains of a red bull painted on his side. At any rate, during my travels around the Mojave outpost, I ran into this lady who is a, pleasure to talk to.
No shit, you washed that old fuck up. I didn't need a Brotherhood scribe to tell me that.
Much like Boone, she's a little edgy for my taste at first, but she's also a potential companion whose caravan got burnt to the ground by who she suspects was the Legion. A little weird that they'd burn the whole thing to the ground before looting it, but who am I to judge? Anyways, she points me towards the Crimson Caravan Company if I'm looking for work, so I'm off to check those guys out. Well, after a quick zip back and forth for a delivery, I'm offered some papers for Cass to sign her now burnt-to-ash company over to the Crimson Caravan. She's reluctant at first, but eventually gets talked into the deal and joins me soon after. This chick is such a drunk that her perk causes you to just ignore alcohol addiction. Apparently my uncle wasn't lying when he said he could quit any time, if this video game is anything to go off of. The coolest thing about Cass is her relation to her father, who is a companion you could recruit in Fallout 2, again tying this game back like Marcus did. While I won't go on and on again, I will say that her father was a complete badass who passed his edge and wit on to his daughter after he had her, before eventually wandering off to try to find Texas.
Did you put a plug in his cock tube to make him explode?
Yeah, Cass is pretty interesting to talk to. She explains how the NCR almost constantly oversteps their bounds, trying to hold on to every single thing that they can get their hands on, but with no way to back up their claims a lot of the time. So when they do stake out an area, much of the time it'll fall into disorder because they don't set up the proper protection, which echoes a lot of what Boone was telling me earlier.
Nobody's dick's that long. Not even Long Dick Johnson, and he had a fucking long dick. Thus the name.
Cassidy's quest involves figuring out what happened to her caravan, and a few others. Clues point you to 3 different caravans before she comes to the conclusion that the Van Graffs and the Crimson Caravan have been working together to eliminate all other competition in the Mojave. When this discovery is made, you can either put a bullet through both of their leaders' heads, or you can pilfer the evidence and bring it to Ranger Jackson up at the Mojave outpost. The latter is, difficult, since I already wiped out the Silver Rush and by extension the Van Graff family for the Brotherhood in my last video, but it is still possible. When all is said and done, Cass gets a health increase for bringing about justice in a half-violent manner. If I had also chosen to pump lead into the Crimson Caravan leader, she would have gotten a gun damage boost. My time with Cass was brief, but she was a lot of fun to talk to. I can't really say I've disliked any companion yet. Hell, I don't even think I've really been neutral towards one. We're just about through the list, so let's hit up my guy Raul next. I remember Raul from my first playthrough, and I also remember the prerequisite to getting up to him. You see, he's imprisoned at the top of this mountain that's been taken over by super mutants, all led by a super mutant named Tabitha. She's been broadcasting a radio show warning that all humans will be shot upon approaching while lording over all of the super mutant guards here. She also has a Mr. Handy sidekick named Rhonda, which seems to be her best friend. At this stage in the game, ascending Black Mountain is no issue, even more so when a super mutant named Neil helps me to distract the Nightkin guard while you sneak in and deal with Tabitha. I kind of took the back way in, so the most he distracts is these fellas' ghosts. The most interesting bit about this whole quest is the dissidence between the first and second generation of super mutants, as the second gen thinks the super mutant boomers are just idiots more or less. Marcus was actually around this area with 2 different groups and tried to keep them from fighting, but eventually left to continue on without them as Tabitha convinced the rest of the second generation here that she was a prophet. Raul stumbled up here one day after hearing that the radio signal had apparently gone down. He offered his services as a handyman, and Tabitha saw this opportunity as a way to keep someone useful around. And so she did, mainly by telling him to sit the fuck down and not to leave. Raul is interesting not only from a character perspective, but from a cultural one, as the things that he tells you about living in Mexico City before the bombs fell and his accent itself are pretty unique across Latino characters in the last 2 games. I will say that there's a bit of a technical issue with his voice volume, as it's pretty quiet compared to most of the other voices in the game, which is kind of annoying. But when you really start listening to his story, it's pretty damn fascinating. Hell, I think he'd give Boone's background story a run for its money. You see, Raul was a punk kid who was great with a pistol back when he was more human-looking.
I know it's surprising, boss, but I wasn't always this handsome.
When the bombs fell, his family started to take in refugees and feed them. Eventually, there were too many people for them to handle, so they had to deny any more from coming in. Well, this pissed a lot of people off, who took to raiding the farm and killing most of his family besides himself and his younger sister. Raul ran off with his sister, pursued by the beginnings of what would eventually form a group of raiders. Him and his sister became scavengers, which led to Raul finding an old novelty vaquero outfit and dressing up in it during their endeavors. He made quite a name for himself before he eventually started to go through the ghoulification process, which left him bedridden. His sister went out to scavenge by herself and wound up getting killed. her body mangled beyond recognition besides the tiny scar that she always had on her knee. Raul hunted down the raiders responsible and killed every single one before he left to Arizona. It was in Arizona where he found his love for repairing things. He repaired things for himself, for others, or just for the hell of it for 75 years, seemingly hanging up his gunslinging hat and his vaquero outfit. One day, a spitting image of his sister showed up in town and began working at a brothel there. Her name was Claudia, and while Raul couldn't bring himself to see her in any brothel-related capacity, he did kind of look out for her without her knowledge. A little creepy, but kinda sweet also. Well, eventually a group of bandits came rolling into town and asked Raul to sell ammo to them. He did so in hoping that they would just leave, but they went straight to the brothel afterwards before shooting it up and kidnapping Claudia. Raul chased them for 3 days and nights without sleep before he caught up. They had killed Claudia and put a bullet through each of her eyes, and Raul snapped. He killed all 7 of them while his own body was being riddled by their bullets. The only thing driving him at this point was pure rage. He somehow survived and dragged his body back to town, where he swore to give up the gunslinging life. After he moved on, I found him at Black Mountain, and the rest is history. Holy shit, man. Yeah, this is just a side character you can miss, by the way. I would love to start running my mouth about the companions in general here, but we do still have 2 more, with one of them being more interesting. So let's get Eddie out of the way, or Edie-E. I'm gonna call him Eddie. Eddie is an old Enclave Eyebot who's been broken to shit in Prim. After some careful mashing of the science and repair keys, he makes a beep boop and I tell Rex to scoot along. Eddie is pretty unique in that he's basically a mobile ammunition conversion and creation workbench, but beyond that he just makes beeping sounds, and points out enemies, and shoots shit. He's cool. What I will say is that while I'm back in Prim, there's something that I neglected to do in the last video, and it's kind of been weighing heavily on me. I made this guy sheriff, and it should have been Prim Slim.
Yeehaw!
I honestly feel a lot safer with Sheriff Prim Slim around, and I really don't see how I could have been so foolish before.
Initializing use of force authorization. Authorization found. Yeehaw!
Alright, that's a lot better. Let's move on and pretend like I didn't reload my old save file for that. So Eddie has a bit more to him that happens over a 5-day wait, but I figured I would hit a few more side quests and kinda wait out the rest. My first stop is at the Atomic Wrangler, which is in need of some, escorts. We're talking a ghoul cowboy, a boyfriend-experienced smooth talker, and a, sex robot.
Fully integrated security technotronic officer active and reporting for duty. Yes, sir. Fisto reporting for duty. Please assume the position. Servos active.
I am programmed for your pleasure.
This game belongs on a cross. It really doesn't help that I got jumped by a roving pack of grandmas when I walked out of my routine cavity search. I'm unsure if I'm even doing a quest anymore, if I'm gonna be honest.
I mean, I'm not into that kind of shit. It is! It will? My god, imagine the possibilities. It didn't happen to come with an owner's manual, did it? Forget it. Trial and error should do it.
The other 2 include Old Ben, who's a helpful retired dude who actually used to be a prostitute, and sadly not Raul. Beatrix fills this role instead, who used to hang out with the followers camp before I scooped her up.
Hello there.
Hello! This video is a blight, and I've never been happier. I figure since we're on the strip still, I should hit a few more things I missed in the last video. First off, we need to recruit some acts for the Tops Casino. This includes a roaming guitar player cowboy, a singer who got into some trouble.
Also, I might have, sort of plowed his daughter. A little.
A ghoul who doesn't know when to shut up, and Billy, whose head somehow got reattached to his body after I blew it off in the previous video. You get a cut of the profits and some strip fame, and that's that. It's a pretty simple quest and not a lot to it, but I enjoyed the banter between these guys and listening to their quips and remarks. The last thing I think I have to do on the strip is head over to Michelangelo's workshop. He has a deal going with House where he builds up these artsy billboards, and he's also kinda locked up here on the strip because of that deal. I fuck with him a little bit at first by getting him to think that I work for House before saying, "Nah, just kidding, dude." He then tells me that he wants me to snap some pictures of notable Mojave signs. I agree to it and start moving before Eddie finally wakes up and begins spitting out some Enclave recordings. Apparently these iBots were meant to be mass-produced to fight for the Enclave before being scrapped for Hellfire armor parts. This one got shipped along with its final destination being Navarro, and that's all the info that we get right now. So after going on my camera-slinging adventure, I return to Michelangelo and he's like, "Wonderful!" And I head out for some more thrilling adventures. So really, the only things I have to do before I load an old save file for Veronica and all of the vaults is a bunch of NCR stuff. Camp Golf, Forlorn Hope, and Bitter Springs are all filled with NCR quests, and now's the best time to take care of them before moving forward. But right before I get to them, Nelson has been taken by Legion soldiers, who have strung up some NCR people in classic biblical fashion. Infiltrating and taking out Legion soldiers in the night is pretty damn fun, albeit relatively tame in terms of New Vegas. Additionally, there are some soldiers in the nearby mine who have been man-napped by the Legion. All relatively straightforward stuff with not a lot of heavy lore. Really, what we needed for this was for one of these soldiers to have a complex background story about his only daughter being force-fed Radaway until she became a schizophrenic anti-ghoul capable of exuding super Radaway which can save the Mojave at the cost of her life. Or something. I'm not an Obsidian writer. I actually really like the environment around Forlorn Hope. Specifically the abandoned Brotherhood of Steel bunker area. I know it's kind of a bleak, dusty desert hellscape, but I guess I've always enjoyed that kind of devoid of life area in games. Hell, the glowing sea was my favorite part about Fallout 4. Anyways, Forlorn Hope's spirits are exactly as you'd imagine them, and the following quests are all about working towards restoring it to have a fighting chance out here on the edges of the map. The quests themselves are all very basic. Hell, one of them is just doing what you did in the Boomer's base and helping the doctor with some patients. While they aren't particularly enthralling, I do have to say that they really help paint a picture of the NCR that was conveyed by quite a few different companions at this point and other people in the Wasteland. The NCR is a meddling, overstepping group of people who take when they don't have enough supplies and men to hold the locations that they're taking. And then on top of that, they have a lot of mundane bureaucracy that they require of their soldiers when the reality is that they should probably slow down and start securing what they have already. All of the little quests that had me jumping through silly hoops really stick out like a sore thumb when they have men out here who are barely making it, with their bodies injured and their spirits broken. All of this is only further exasperated with the incompetent people that they put in charge when they run out of good soldiers. You've got some lady who's in charge of comms at a ranger station who's afraid of the Omertas because she owes a debt to them. You got guys stealing medical supplies in the middle of the night. You got soldiers fucking around with a grenade and having it blow them to shit in their hands. Then you got this old-timer who's seen battles and wars and thinks that as long as the NCR continues down this route, innocent people will die, and so lying about different absurd things like the Legion having super mutant soldiers will keep morale down enough for the NCR to eventually back down from Caesar. Shit like that makes the NCR look like a bunch of idiots, and it makes the Legion's seemingly smooth operations and ruthless tactics look a lot more fearsome as a result. I do believe that the NCR has good values. I do believe that they want what's best for humanity, but they're an incredibly flawed group, and the Legion's constant chipping away really does make their fight seem futile at times. But at any rate, I help the NCR take back Nelson and patch up the rest of the camp. Then I attempt to turn this guy in who's been spreading misdirection, and he gives this speech over the intercoms before shooting himself in the head. Sweet fuck, NCR. Before moving on to Bitter Springs, I will say that there were people commenting in the last video about perception, and that if it's too high, you tend to almost always have red blips on your compass. I really started to feel like that out near all these camps, because I could never tell if the red mark is a Legionnaire hiding in ambush around the corner, or if it's a gecko eating some grass out in Wyoming somewhere. I know that this boost in perception comes from Eddie's perk, but still. At any rate, Bitter Springs is pretty fucked also. You got a lack of soldiers, you got a lack of supplies, you got refugees limping around like they gotta take a shit at all times. Honestly, after the whole massacre of the Khans thing that took place here, it kinda seems like the Khans were better off living here than the NCR is now. It just kinda seems silly to take a location without having the proper reinforcements to keep it going without people suffering. So I grab some supplies, I help out the doctors here, and I try to get some reinforcements going.
Hey, you're a damn fine soldier, and word on the grapevine is that you're already some kind of hero. You got yourself a deal. Yeah, whatever.
It's interesting and kind of rewarding in a way to visit each of these locations that you've helped out already and be granted reinforcements on demand, but it also speaks volumes about how these guys operate. I mean, realistically, most of these people have lots on their plates already, and it would make sense for an area like Forlorn Hope to not be able to spare any men. Yet, because you just help them and scratch their backs, they're now able to spare soldiers that you need for Bitter Springs. It just almost seems self-centered in a way, to look at another part of the military that you're in and go, I know they have it worse off, but yeah, you haven't really helped us enough over here yet. Beyond all of that help, I also convince a Khan who's been picking off refugees and NCR soldiers at a camp with a sniper rifle to return back to his fold in the Great Khans. I kinda got a feel for a guy who's just out here trying to avenge the atrocities committed against his people. And I can't help but feel that things could have gone differently with how amiable the Khans have been towards me in my efforts to help them find themselves. Well, the last thing I gotta do is whip a squad into shape over at Camp Golf. Apparently the NCR sends all of the fuck-ups here.
All I have to do is ride that mediocrity gradient to a cushy, do-nothing job miles away from the war.
This was the last of the NCR quests that I wanted to hit. And if I said my image of them hadn't changed, I'd be lying through my teeth. There isn't much else that I haven't said already, but I do have to say that they're an incredibly well-written, flawed group of individuals. My initial views on them stem from the idea that, yeah, sure they were flawed, but they still did things right. Seeing their internal workings and machinations really only took my views of them in a different direction, as I still agree with their primary motives, but their methods of operation could use a lot of upgrades. But at the end of the day, with all of these NCR side quests out of the way, I think there's really only one thing that I can say to sum up my thoughts.
Monster of the East, huh?
Well, I've got the Monster of the West in my holster right now.
Hope I get to introduce them.
Alright, fuck the NCR. Let's finish off the other stuff I need to hit and do some cool Veronica shit. So Eddie's side quest isn't really super compelling by any means. I thought it was going to ramp up into something with more to chew on, but it's really just a bot that has data stored about Poseidon energy and some Enclave info. If the Brotherhood was still alive on this save file, I'd be contacted by both them and the followers for the purposes of upgrading it in exchange for the data that's listed on it. But as it stands, I was only contacted by the followers. So I get the upgrade to Eddie's weapons, and that's it. Yay. Now there's one more thing that we have to take care of. Camp Searchlight is a town riddled with radiation and littered with ghoul soldiers trying to keep others out. It's a really cool part of the map that takes that greenish, hazy filter which Fallout 3 was so fond of, and exudes it here to make the area different from the rest of the map. After mowing down the roving ghouls, I head down to the basement of this church, where some prospectors are looking around for some radiation suits to help them pick the town clean of valuables. The head prospector in charge isn't very friendly, but I work a deal out with him to grab some suits from the Nipton area. After this, you get to play the role of a prospector, picking through a couple of different areas around Searchlight and turning them into Logan here. Also, this big fucking thing is here, and god do I hate it. I hate bugs so much. Scorpions aren't bugs. Still, I don't like them. As you look through the different clues, it's apparent that Camp Searchlight was an NCR base of operations before it was forced to house a large amount of nuclear waste. Well, something went awry with the waste storage and the town got melted, turning many of the soldiers around here into ghouls. When you're all done, the mean man decides to be a bad person to you in a cruel twist that only a sadist could imagine, by deciding to commit suicide with 2 sniper rifle bullets to the head. How inhumane to make me witness that and then stick me with all of this grief and burden of all of these helpful spare supplies. Alright, let's reload an old save. Though I do have to say, moving from a level 24 character all the way back down to level 16 really sucks. All of that time and XP wasted, all of the things that I'm used to, but it's okay. I'm gonna earn it back the old-fashioned way, no problem. So anyways, Veronica. She's out here at a trading post looking particularly harmless. She's also a scribe in the Brotherhood of Steel, which she lies about to see how you'd react at first.
I had a run-in with this group calling themselves the Brotherhood of Steel. Pretty strange bunch. Do you know anything about them?
She immediately asks you if you'll take her along, with her motives being that she just wants to travel around and see the sights. If you know anything about the Brotherhood, you'll know that she is almost 99% lying here, and that she has some kind of ulterior motive. In order to trigger her companion quests, a bit of exploring is in order. So instead of getting right to the core of her issues, I'm going to start exploring some of the vaults in the game in no particular order. Let's start with a vault that's right around the corner, Vault 11. So right away we see a slew of political voting posters plastered everywhere in the vault. These flyers, which state who to vote for or against, litter just about every single wall to some degree. When you get further in, a terminal gleans some information about the elections. The first candidate makes a case about how he's worthy of the vote. Pretty standard stuff. The second announces that while they haven't done these horrible things that an opponent has accused them of, that they aren't candidate material and that voting for them would lead to ruin. The third candidate exclaims that they didn't even want to be in this election, and that everyone should be ashamed of themselves. Alright, good start. After this, there was apparently some murders involving the candidates until eventually the election system was fully automated. After this, a security terminal reveals that a woman's husband was going to be endorsed for the election because he was on a poker winning streak. In order to prevent this endorsement, she performed sexual favors for the entire block of leadership for a month. Well, her husband was endorsed anyways, and so she killed the entire leadership that was involved. She then goes on to state that she's probably going to be elected because of these murders. So breaking down what we know so far, election to Overseer of the Vault is apparently a bad thing here. Furthermore, the Overseer who changed the election system into an automated one was the lady who killed all of those leadership members. All of this is only furthered by the actual posters themselves. When I glanced at them at first, I thought, these are just average election posters, but further examination tells the player that all of these posters say something negative about the person that they're endorsing, or something positive about their opponent. To be fair, I thought maybe there were two Haleys or something along those lines and I would hear both sides further in. But really, they're just endorsements for the quote-unquote bad people to be elected. Well, eventually I find a log explaining the entire scenario that took place here. Indeed, getting elected in Vault 11 is a bad thing, as the one elected must then be sacrificed at the behest of the computer system in the vault. If no one's elected, the computer threatens to kill every single dweller. The very first Overseer wasn't told that there was anything more to this system, and instead made the election system seem like a really positive thing. Soon after, the Vault Dwellers learned the truth, and chaos broke out as the election system became an extremely ugly thing. But the cruelest irony of all was that if every person decided to go against the computer's will and not elect anyone, they'd all be set free to roam the wasteland or just do whatever they wanted. You learn this information when you yourself enter the sacrifice chamber, where a film projector plays a very Vault-Tech-esque film about you making a very selfless choice for the good of the people, before the walls fall away and tons of armed robots begin unleashing hell into the chamber. The last 5 remaining survivors found out about the workaround the hard way, as they all elected to not elect someone as a sacrifice and were promptly greeted with a cheery message calling them a shining example to humanity. So 4 of these 5 killed themselves soon after. God, I love Vault so much. So the next one on the list is number 19, since I already have it discovered. The entrance to the vault is pretty interesting, but at first glance there's not too much happening with it. The powder gangers have holed up here and are working on trying to extract some sulfur from the bottom of the vault, which is defended by fire geckos. The person who's leading the charge here was the one who actually busted the powder gangers out of prison in the first place, Samuel Cook. Because of the stuff that he's gone through, Sam here hates the NCR with a passion, viewing them as tyrannical leaders who think that they own everything. Anyways, I head through the vault to take out the geckos, stopping by at different terminals and rooms to gather info on the place. The stuff I find seems to point towards some sort of experimentation going on in the vault, seeing as some kids were hearing some high-pitched voice-like noises coming from the intercom system when it was supposed to be off. In addition to this, the whole vault is divided into a red and blue sector, and there seems to be some kind of paranoia regarding what the other color is doing a lot of the time. Stuff like wondering why a blue is hanging around a security door, or speculation that one of the reds sabotaged the water filter. Well, it turns out that the general paranoia is an induced one, as there are 2 Overseer's offices here, one that's open and one that's shut off from the rest. The shut-off one runs the experiment on the rest of the vault, in which a non-chemical and non-violent method of inducing said paranoia is implemented to see how the dwellers react. The most interesting bit of this area is actually the part where I get the option to stick C4 onto a gigantic pile of sulfur, which would annihilate the tunnels and the vault above, presumably killing off all of the powder gangers with it. I decided against it since I still hadn't reported back to Samuel Cook, but it was tempting. When I report back, he tells me that he wants me to ask the cons to let them join, which is interesting because apparently quite a few of the gangers here actually want to return to the NCR and ask for forgiveness. Unfortunately, the rest of this quest kind of plays out in a pretty boring way. As much as I thought it would play out differently, the non-chemical part of the experiment kind of makes what I had in mind hard to pull off. I figured the gangers would have kind of killed each other in a bout of paranoia when I returned, which would have put a bow on this quest nicely. But that isn't the case, making this vault a subpar one to me personally. Alright, so we're 2 for 6 on vaults here. The next one that I've been to already is actually one that I mentioned briefly in the last video. Vault 21 is the vault which has been turned into a hotel located on the Strip. There's not a ton to discuss about the experimentation involved with this one, as it was built on one simple facet: equality through gambling. Every fight, argument, or major decision was made through one side gambling against the other. It's how the vault came to be a hotel. Mr. House basically offered the vault a place on the Strip, to which one half of the vault agreed and the other half disagreed. Well, you can guess which side won the blackjack game, as the rest is history. After this, most of the vault was filled in with concrete, as the valuables were stripped away and the whole thing was repurposed as a tourist attraction. The sign out front utilizes the heavy vault door as the main eye-catcher, and the legacy lives on as a place for post-apocalyptic tourists to catch a glimpse of what it was like to live in Vault-Tech's machinations. I actually recognized the background music for this place coming from MODOK in Fallout 2, and then as I kind of went through the game, I realized that a lot of music comes from the older games, and a lot of it actually shows up in these vaults. I won't point out every single song, but I thought it was kind of neat. So remember Vault 34? It's where the boomers came out of when they staked their claim to the Mojave. Some of the story was told by the kid who basically told you that the vault had plenty of weapons but suffered from an overpopulation issue. Well, what he neglects to mention, and what you find out in this vault, is that the group who eventually became the Boomers staged a coup and fought their way out into freedom, which the Overseer initially denied them when they asked for it. The Overseer then stationed armed men around key points of the vault to ensure no more escapes could happen. Well, as you can imagine, this didn't help the overpopulation issues that the vault was facing, and in one more unsuccessful coup, the reactor was hit, exposing the vault to large amounts of radiation and causing the lowest level to flood completely. All of this is evidenced through several terminals throughout the irradiated vault, and the absolute assload of ghouls that are left over. I guess that whole every citizen has a weapon thing that I mentioned in the last video doesn't quite work out when there isn't enough space. Though to be fair, it doesn't seem like every citizen did have a weapon, despite there being tons of them stockpiled in the armory. Honestly, to me, Vault 34 is another subpar vault in a string of subpar vaults. I feel like I hit the mother lode in terms of these vaults on the very first try, which kinda sucks. Not that this one is worse than the last couple in terms of interesting story design, it's just aggressively average, I guess. At least the Boomer's existence actually does help pad this one's lore out a little more, which is good. So Vault 3 is in the middle of this godforsaken karma experience mine of a Borderlands psycho gang infested shithole conveniently located in a Fallout 3 Washington DC ruined pile of worthless scrap and broken buildings. Pretty much all of the fiends open fire on you until you reach the actual vault, where a speech check comes in handy to let you further in with no more fighting.
In Mojave's Vault number 3 is the dumbest gang you'll ever see. They want Jet, Buff, and Psycho to feed their misery. Well, it's doom and gloom when fiends need room in Control Vault 3.
Yeah, this was a control vault. Shit was pretty much paradise for all the people here. No interference from Vault-Tech at all. They were so naive that they let the fiends in here willingly. So yeah, that kinda had to be a hell of a wake-up call. And as comparatively boring as this vault is, it is kinda sad to think about a group of innocent people just going about their lives, only to be destroyed in a day for being nice to others.
I guess it isn't a secret. Yeah, the residents of the vault are all dead. We killed them.
Alright, last vault. Number 22 actually has a quest attached to it in which this guy wants you to retrieve some data from the vault, seeing as the experiment involved trying to solve the inevitable food shortage issue that was sure to plague the wasteland after the bombs fell. The issue here is that all of the other researchers, mercs, and wandering couriers that he's sent there so far have never made it back. Well, turns out that they definitely figured out how to make the plants grow, as the first thing that you see is a sign that says, "Hey, turn back, idiot, these plants reap the souls of human lives," or something like that. Yeah, this place is an overgrown nightmare, but it's also probably the most unique looking vault in the game. Even the enemies are relatively unique as well. These little shop of horrors monsters appear alongside these human-like carriers in this location and a handful of other places in the game, and it's very unsettling to navigate these halls which have been overrun with plant life. The whole experiment got out of hand when these scientists here decided to start using a type of fungus for pest control. The fungus basically infected and consumed the host, and unfortunately had this effect on humans as well. The spores are contagious, and soon the stuff spread from dweller to dweller, consuming their bodies and turning them into highly contagious beasts. So my mission here is to retrieve this data and the last researcher to come explore the vault. When I get to the researcher, she insists that we need to destroy the spores with an explosion, and delete the data. I send off a blast of fire throughout the bottom level, but everything looks pretty much the same after. Actually, knowing what I know now, I'd be a little concerned for my character's well-being. Though it actually doesn't affect me at all, which kinda seems like a missed opportunity for an interesting side quest involving retrieving or making a cure. Either way, I return to Keeley, who insists on destroying the research notes. I convince her otherwise, stating that this mistake could be made again if we do so, which is absolutely true. When all is said and done, I return to Hildern, who gives me his biggest assurance that the data recovered won't be misused.
We're with the government, for goodness sake. Have a little faith in us.
I don't need a huge epitaph for the vaults in New Vegas, though I will say that they range from fantastic to, well, mediocre at best. And unfortunately, quite a few of them fall into the latter category. Still, exploring vaults is almost always a good time for me, and I appreciate their presence in the game. So where does that leave us? Well, we still got Veronica's quests. Partway through all of this exploring, she mentions a few times that the Brotherhood is lacking something that the NCR has, and how they're going to be left in the dust and stuff like that. Eventually, she asks me for a chat and tells me that she realized what it is that the Brotherhood is missing, and that she needs to go back to speak with them. If there's anything that I've learned about Veronica, it's that she punches harder than Tyson and has a good sense of humor.
I'll encourage people to name their non-ugly children after you. Seriously.
But I haven't actually learned a ton about who she is yet. She seems purposefully mysterious, much like Arcade Gannon, seemingly shirking off your questions about her. What she does tell you is more about Father Elijah, a Brotherhood elder. She tells you that her relationship with him was as close as a granddaughter to a grandfather, at least as much as she could imagine. Of course, this was at the beginning. Over time, she describes him as someone who changed, initially teaching her to question the Brotherhood's methods, but later getting into fights over key positions and decisions while not caring what the Brotherhood would have used those positions for. He wanted power for the Brotherhood to push the limits of the technology which they found, and use it to push them into a position of dominance. The rest of the Elders were more about preserving and observing different relics and weapons from times past. Well, his overzealous nature caused a huge loss for the Brotherhood at the first place that I actually hit in this video, Helios 1. They had gotten to the place first and were trying to unlock the potential behind it, but the NCR was hot on their tails. Father Elijah demanded that his men hold their ground until he could figure it out, which resulted in the deaths of the entire squad. Most assumed Elijah was dead too, but Veronica found a note from him at a comm station soon after. Apparently, old Elijah has started to go insane, as the note mentioned that he would be back with enough force to make the Mojave what it was meant to be. After all of this, Veronica does finally get a little more personal and mention that she's been in love before, but the girl wound up leaving Veronica behind and moving away from the Brotherhood. In addition to this, Veronica's mom was a scribe and her dad was a paladin, but they both perished in a fight against the NCR. You would think this would give Veronica a deep disdain for the NCR, but she seems to understand that each side was just doing what it was meant to do, which is kind of refreshing. She's interesting. She doesn't seem to hold grudges in a way that an average person might, and she's constantly criticizing the Brotherhood of Steel's methodology, yet she's still proud to be a part of it. I suppose it's a lot like someone being proud of being born in their country, but still critical of their government. But this frame of mind that she possesses has apparently made a lot of the Brotherhood's members a little tired of her. From how she tells it, she asks a lot of questions that the leadership doesn't want to hear. So she set out to learn from other, larger, more successful factions, figure out what they're doing right, and what the Brotherhood can change to get back into fighting shape. Damn, I really respect this girl. Well, she tells Hardin pretty much what I just described to you. That the Brotherhood is on the wrong path, that shit's not gonna work out, less making enemies, more making friends. And he's like, well, what the fuck, we used to destroy armies with just a handful of well-armed and trained men. And she's like, yeah, that's clearly working now, isn't it? It's a boomer versus zoomer argument for the ages, and it ends how most of these arguments tend to end. We walk out on them. I think Veronica was really affected by this conversation because she turns into a slab of metal immediately after. She goes on to say how stuck in his ways Hardin is, but explains that she's able to forgive him because he taught her how to box. Then she basically explains that the followers of the apocalypse weren't much of a force, but because they made so many friends with their beliefs and how they treated others, they're now growing at a pretty steady rate. She says that if the Brotherhood could be in that position, that they could be a force to be reckoned with. To try to prove to Hardin that he's running in the wrong direction, we're going to recover some technology that will hopefully convince him to see our side. On the way out of the bunker, a group of 3 paladins cut us off and go, "We're not gonna let you trick our elder into being smarter." Then they disappear like ghosts. Spooky. So the 3 different technologies that we can pursue here are actually all things that I've encountered throughout this video so far. We got the pulse gun, which I found in Vault 34. Apparently its use involves rendering power armor useless, which is obviously a threat to the Brotherhood. Then we got the rangefinder, which is used to help the Archimedes 2 target places and annihilate shit. Ironically, Veronica thinks that if she figures out that Elijah's decision at Helios 1 was for a fruitless endeavor, she could show how silly the Brotherhood was being. But if the Elder had found out what you had found out in that lucky old Sun quest, he probably would have been hailed as a Brotherhood hero. Maybe. Seems like the other Elders would have simply locked down and hoarded the technology, and he would have used it to start wiping out other factions off the map. The final thing is the 3-pound bag of Scott's Turf Builder Grass Seed Sun and Shade mix found in Vault 22. I already gave that one to Hildern, so that's out. And I already have the Buzz Lightyear gun, so let's just go give him that. Well, spoiler alert, the argument goes pretty much the same. Hardin believes that he's on the right path, Veronica tells him that he's being close-minded. We storm back out, Veronica turns into a wall, and she tells you that she's going to join the followers. You can convince her to stay in the Brotherhood, but I honestly think that this is probably the better decision for someone as forward-thinking as Veronica. The ghosts reappear to try to dissuade this decision, but I tell them to piss off. So we skip over to the followers' outpost and we ask for a job application. We're told to wait a day for the application lad to come back, so we do.
Hello there. It's good to see a friendly face.
Apparently some rogue Brotherhood members, likely the ones from before, further express their disdain and decide to kill everyone off at the followers' outpost. So I guess my decision wasn't the best idea for their health. The aforementioned kill squad then tries to kill us for sharing Brotherhood secrets with outsiders, resulting in a fight between us and them. Which, we didn't actually share any secrets, but okay. In the last video, I expressed my disdain for the loss of the Brotherhood at the hands of the NCR. I can see now that I shouldn't have been so worried. Honestly, there are probably some good people in the Brotherhood of Steel. Veronica is a shining example of that. But it seems that a lot of the Brotherhood is as close-minded and paranoid as their leadership seems to exude, and I can see why they're a dying breed out here in the Mojave. Veronica blames herself for the followers' deaths, but understands that she couldn't control what the Brotherhood did to them. She's a good example of a rebel who tried her best to change things for the better without using force, and I feel bad for her and the situation that she seems to have been born into. I figured that the least I could do to make her feel better was to get her that fancy dress that she always wanted.
Do you mean it? No, it's too much. Well, okay, but it's too much. Oh, it's perfect. Thank you.
New Vegas companions are a real treat for the most part. I had a lot of fun making them happy, learning their backgrounds, and gaining their insights. I said it before, but I can definitely see why people are so attached to them, and why they feel like they're almost essential. My personal top 3 are easily Raul, Boone, and Veronica, but I can easily see the case for Cassidy, Arcade, and even Lily. They all ooze their own charm, even if it doesn't seem like it at first. The perks that they bring to the table aren't always the greatest, but they all suit their owners and really made me feel like I was working in a team. I've completely reversed my opinions on companions, at least in New Vegas, and I really don't think the game would be the same without them. So that's it, right? I hit all of the super memorable side quests, and the ones which gave me insight into stuff like the NCR, the Boomers, the Brotherhood. I'd say this is where I would wrap up the video, but I figured after coming this far and getting to the bottom of how all of these factions tick, what's the harm in one more? I've never given the Legion a fair shake. I've just seen them as the quintessential bad guys, the driving antagonists. But what makes them how they are? I know this video is named something along the lines of, help me, I can't think of a title right now, but this is a new Vegas video about side quests and companions. But some side quests do involve being on the Legion's good side. Why not hit those along with a few of the main Legion quests? So I get to say goodbye to all of my cool shit I have in my inventory again for one last run. The Legion is as ruthless as I've already made them out to be. They're careful, they're clever, and they're probably about 40 other C-words I can't think of right now. But for all of their cautiousness, Caesar gives you the opportunity to very easily bring them down. It's interesting. The guy goes on about how much I've worked against him, and all of the things that I've done to hinder their progress.
And you fell for that? Really? Because I'm going to have you killed now. Relax. I'm fucking with you.
And then he allows me access to House's bunker, a place which could have anything, a place that he suspects to be very dangerous. You know how easy it would be for me to do House's bidding at this point? It just seems like a tremendous oversight. No armed guards accompanying me, I get my weapons back. I've shown how driven I am when I want my way, it's something that Caesar compliments me on. It just doesn't add up. Fortunately for him, I've decided to work with him and destroy House's toys. And then House right after. Then Caesar fills me in on the way that the Legion works. How his personal guard has to beat the previous personal guard in one-on-one combat to the death to fill the position. How Legate Lanius was a tribal who used to slaughter Caesar's men before turning on his own tribe when they tried to surrender. How Caesar offered Lanius the position that he's in exchange for Lanius being able to murder the rest of his tribe's men. But more importantly to how much that I've spoken about the NCR, Caesar also gives his 2 cents. He notes that the NCR was founded by a man whose daughter became the president of it, for 52 years.
Does that sound like a democracy to you? Or a hereditary dictatorship?
As soon as she died, Caesar tells you that the NCR weakened considerably, that they began to be a bunch of rulers making deals that benefited themselves at the detriment of their citizens. And so Caesar's Legion is here to end their perceived tyranny so that they can go on and do something good for the rest of civilization. Jesus, that's almost a really convincing argument if you can manage to look past the crucifixions. Like I mentioned in the last video, Caesar himself was a follower of the apocalypse. Born into the NCR, his dad was killed by some raiders and his mom joined the followers soon after. So Caesar was a linguist who was sent to try to learn the dialects of different tribes around the Grand Canyon. He was kidnapped around that time by a tribe for ransom, but he noted that none of them seemed to really know what the fuck they were doing. So he taught them how to fight, how to drill, how to conquer, and they in turn made him their leader. They began conquering the other tribes around them, before eventually taking whole areas over. Their beliefs aren't in the individual, but in the state. Everything to serve the nation, to make it stronger. And destroying the NCR will be the Legion's crowning achievement, which makes it a superpower in this new world. One that protects both its citizens and the military power of the dictator. Yeah, that's some information. While I can't really agree with the methods displayed, I actually understand Caesar's frustrations with the corruption in the NCR. That is a fantastic quality to write into your villain. And just like that, the Legion goes from the boogeyman to a villain which could be perceived as a hero in the right light. At any rate, enough about that. I run over to House and destroy him again, which brings up another small, logical inconsistency. House knows that I'm working against him now. I just destroyed his robot army for the Legion. Why on earth would I be allowed back into the strip without having to fight his security to get in? I mean, hell, I can still enter the Lucky 38 and his dumb robots just stare at me. At least everything opens fire on me when I get to the presidential suite, but it just seems so odd that House would allow me to make it this far before becoming hostile. Anyways, let's get back to some side quests. So the first one isn't really a sprawling side quest, it's more just listening to Vulpes talk about what they did in Nipton earlier. He talks like a maniac and then tells me to go tell the NCR what happened. I kinda thought this might lead me into taunting the shit out of the NCR or something. But I just told this guy, yo, nipped and biffed it. And he goes, oh god, oh fuck, we're doomed. Jesus, that was quick. I mean, I understand what he was going for here with the whole Legion already doing hood rat shit on their side of the river. But I mean, these guys have already been doing stuff around the Mojave for literally the whole game. It's nothing new. And Nipton was a town ran by a greedy asshole who just sold off his prostitutes to whoever would pay. It's not like they burnt down Camp McCarran. As much as I want to blame this guy for being spineless, I think his response was just kind of poorly written. Just one of those things to show you, oh yeah, you're making the Legion more powerful or something, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like I really painted this gruesome picture and got him to start weeping over it. Dude just broke down at the mere mention of a random non-NCR town being razed. Either way. After this, I run a few quests for Vulpes. The first one just has me checking in on a spy, which is no issue. But the second one leads me to the other side of the quest that I had earlier where I prevented Captain Curtis from blowing up the monorail. Well, this time I'm gonna help him out with his terrorism scheme. Hello, NSA. I'm talking about a video game. Thanks. To do this, I've got to frame a prankster in the NCR who's been getting in trouble, kill him, and then bomb the monorail. All relatively easy, but I did like the quest a lot more from this angle. And again, just look at how efficiently the Legion operates. This guy was sent here 3.5 years ago, before the NCR even knew about the Legion's threat. That cold, calculating mentality really has no business in losing to the NCR. I mean it, after everything that I've been through, there is absolutely zero reason that the Legion should lose here. I guess besides the courier. I don't know. In a battle of incompetence versus machine-like efficiency, the outcome should be pretty obvious. I mean, Caesar's men aren't even allowed to use drugs or anything like that. They have a tremendous advantage in what they're willing to do and what they aren't willing to stand for. So yeah, at this point I'm more than curious, and I guess I'm gonna finish out the video with the main quest stuff. Away, motherfuckers. The last little loose end to wrap up though before that is taking out Camp Forlorn Hope. Interestingly enough, Caesar's orders were to simply hold Nelson, not take the camp across the way. It's another instance of Caesar knowing that the Legion has limitations, and instead of wasting men on something that may help a little bit, holding something that they're pretty sure that they can effectively hold is the better decision here. It's the exact opposite of the NCR's philosophy, and it seems to be working. Well, jumping back into the main quest has me doing a lot of shit that I've done before this. Boomers, White Glove Society, Brotherhood of Steel, you know the drill. Partway through this process, Caesar suffers an intense headache, one that stops him from being able to give more orders. As you keep returning to him, the condition seems to worsen. He experiences an absence seizure, and no amount of prying will allow you to help him. Small complaint here. No matter how much I help these guys, how much I do for them and make enemies of their enemies, I must relinquish my weapons and keep my companions outside, every single time. It's honestly ridiculous, and I know the first thing to jump to is, well, they're being cautious, you just complimented them on that a lot, which is true. But I also admonish their decision to arm me and send me into House's bunker to potentially fuck them over. It just seems ridiculous to me when I've done so much to help them. And I guess it's more of a technicality at this point because every single time I make it to the fort, I have to go through a weapon dialogue, walk all the way up to the fort, navigate to Caesar's tent, tell my companions to wait, walk in and take care of business, retrieve my companions, and then fast travel to wherever I need to go and re-equip my weapon. I know it really doesn't sound like that much, but it's kind of a slog when you keep doing it over and over again. And I think that the different rank systems that you see in, say, Elder Scrolls games where you move through ranks and gain more and more access to various things suits the Legion and even the NCR perfectly. It would be nice to move from Recruit Legionary all the way up to Legate or at least Centurion. Oh well. So Caesar has a tumor. He entrusts you to rip it out, but you need the tools to do so. There are several options here, all with different effects. I can retrieve Autodoc bits from Vault 34, grab some surgical tools from a clinic, or sell Arcade Gannon into slavery. Then I require a high medicine check when performing the surgery itself, or I can just be really fucking lucky. Even then, I can arrange Caesar's death if I wish. I like the sheer amount of options here and the parallels it draws to the real-life Julius Caesar. The next phase involves fixing up an artillery cannon and assassinating the NCR president. It's pretty much just the opposite of what I did in the last video, but it also gives you some insight on Caesar's disposition towards Kimball. He relays to you that President Kimball of the NCR had a lot of potential as the general. He was ruthless and draconian in the methods that he used, but eventually he retired and relied on elections to become president. Caesar tells you that if he had been in Kimball's shoes, he'd have used the military to stage a coup and seize power that way instead. He views democracy as weak and riddled with time and power-wasting aspects that only serve to hold back a nation. Okay, I'm not going to go into gross detail about the ending here because I covered the opposite side in the last video. I assassinate Kimball, I meet up with Lanius and we take the dam. I convince General Oliver to fuck off and the game ends. I would argue that the Courier's talents to get things done suits the Legion or House's narrative a lot more than the NCR's. The NCR bogs you down, has its head up its own ass, and is generally harder to work around. The Legion doesn't seem to have these issues. They already have men like Lanius, who has been proven to be a killing machine in his own right, someone who brutally gets results with unwavering calculation. The Courier adding to this almost seems like an inevitability. Whereas I almost seemed like I was out of place when I was helping the NCR a lot of the time because I was more of an unheard of miracle solution to a nightmare of incompetence. So let's wrap things up. The amount of side quests in this game, if you include companions, is monumental. I'm talking over double my hours played from the last video to this one. I am 100% sure that I'm missing a few, or a lot. I honestly just kind of went with the comprehensive list from people's comments off the last video. And I am well aware that the DLC still needs to be done. But that said, I had a lot more fun than I thought I would. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the NCR story and all of the other different factions that I experienced in the last video. But I didn't expect the absolute knockout stories that I got from companions. I didn't expect the two main opposing factions to be so well written, and have so many overlooked strengths and flaws. And I definitely didn't expect playable slot machines to actually exist in the game, once again proving that no matter how obvious something is, someone out there is going to miss it. I'm not a pessimistic person by any means, but I did come into these new Vegas videos with the mindset of, alright, I'm gonna find some shit that I hate about the game and people are gonna be upset. I'm sure a few of you were expecting me to really jab at its weak points. But I just feel that the minor things like the handful of tedious filler quests, the occasional NPC bug or freakout, and the slow movement speed, they're all just so small. In a lesser game, these are some bigger issues for me. In a lesser game, I would look at slow movement speed and say, wow, this really ruins the game in a lot of ways. But I tend to complain about these things more because the game isn't providing me with something to sink my teeth into and distract myself from these shittier parts. No game is going to be perfect, and that includes New Vegas. Hell, you have to mod it to some degree to get it to play effectively on most PCs. That should never be the case, but it is. We'll end on this note. I did a lot of gushing in my previous video, which led to the occasional comment of, this again, another fanboy who wants to praise New Vegas like we didn't have enough of that already. Look, I get it. But I'm also gonna say right now that, to me, if any game deserves this kind of praise, it's a game like New Vegas. There's a lot of pushback when it comes to different chunks of various mediums receiving a lot of praise. You get the fans who really want other people to experience this great thing that they experienced, and sometimes they get insistent to a point where they begin comparing every other game in the genre to the game that they love. It's understandable, but it also causes others to be driven away, to start disliking the repeated praise. If you guys know me, you'll know that I've never cared about how many fans a franchise or game has. If it has bad parts, I'm going to complain about them. So when I run through New Vegas and the most that I can come up with negativity-wise is, it could have been better optimized for sure, it makes me personally think that there is something special to it which we haven't seen a lot of since. Thanks for watching. I'll get the DLC video out after this one, no worries. Until then, I have a Twitch where I press buttons and make things move for your enjoyment. I have a Twitter where I say, hey, new video's out. I have a Discord where people say things with a speech check of at least 6. And I have a Patreon. And that's it. Have a good one.